And what I want to bring up from Music Monday before we get into some of the topics you guys sent is the following. I have a slogan here that I wanted to read. What they did not want to ever to find out is that your generation, the generation born between 1980 and 1995, actually outnumbers the baby boomers. They knew that if you ever turned your eye towards political reform, that you could change the world. They tried to keep you sated on vapid television and vapid music. They cut off your education and fed you brain candy. They took away your music and gave you top 10 pop stations. They cut off your art and replaced it with endless reality shows. That meme's been circulating around the internet. I'm not sure who the specific author is, but I did share that meme today. And the reason I brought it up for Music Monday, you know, on Music Monday, we kind of draw the connection between music and the political situation. Because for me personally, and I know a lot of you fall into that category, some of you don't. Some of you are opening up more towards music because of this show, and that makes me thrilled. You know, my editor Joe told me that he has been making a Music Monday playlist for himself. All the music we talk about, he looks it up and he puts it into a playlist for himself, so you can kind of learn more about it. And I was thrilled to hear that. And I hope, man, if I hope a couple people are also doing that. I just think that's so freaking cool. But there's always been a distinct connection between music and politics for me. The music that I grew up with, that helped me get through my childhood, that helped me deal with my teenage angst and my adult angst, quite frankly. A lot of that music really went on to inform my politics. You know, I'm a punk rocker. I grew up on the Dead Kennedys, on Bad Religion, on the DC hardcore bands. And then, of course, I got into the poppier side of it, too, that was singing about girls, because I went through my teenage phase where I really connected with that. But you know, a lot of that really kind of shaped the way I saw the world. And then, of course, it led me to reading Noam Chomsky and stuff like that. So I've always seen the link very distinctly. And that's why we do a Music Monday. That's why I see the connection between doing a Music Monday on a show called Get Your News On with Ron, where we send each other ideas, and that's how we build it. And there's a couple music stories today, even. But so I wanted to focus on that one segment in the meme I just shared. They took away your music and gave you top 10 pop stations. We all know what happened. In 1996, radio got homogenized, and the local medium of radio got gutted and replaced with a very homogenized top 40 playlist all across the country. Before, it didn't used to be that way. And I am just old enough to remember when you had to seek out music pre-internet. I discovered punk rock pre-internet. Or at least, well, maybe the internet was probably around, but it wasn't, well, it was around. I shouldn't say probably. It was around, but it wasn't what it became as far as an information highway. It was around, but it was like unheard of for a band to have a website or something like that. So it wasn't the tool we know it as. Was it in existence? Yes, of course it was, but it wasn't what we know it as. You guys see what I'm saying? So I remember what it was like, and there were some edgier shows on the radio, and those were the types of shows that would play Rancid, that would play Bad Religion. And I connected with that stuff more than any of the other stuff, and I was like, what the hell is this? So I would go out and I would find those records. That was back when even your suburban shopping mall, you know, I mean, I grew up in the suburbs in western Pennsylvania. It was hard. You know, once I went to high school in the city, finding subculture became a lot easier. I found my local punk record store, so I found out where all the venues were, and by that point, the internet was kind of what we know it as now. So, but before then, the only thing available to me, because I lived in the suburbs and I couldn't drive yet, was the suburban shopping malls with the record stores that they had there, and they did have them. And, you know, were they like outstanding record stores? No, but what they did have was they had what are called compilation CDs, what those were, you know, a lot of smaller labels, they couldn't afford the advertising budgets the big corporate labels could. So the way they kind of got the word out there about their bands is they would have compilation CDs in all these record stores. What that was it was a CD or a cassette in some cases that would feature one or two songs from each band on their label. And they would sell it for a really cheap price because it was meant as a promotional thing. You could get a compilation CD for about $4 or $5. So if there were a couple bands you liked on a particular label, you kind of thought to yourself, I bet I would like the other bands on this label. I like Rancid and I like Bad Religion. I bet I would like some of the other Epitaph bands too. Who's this band Pennywise? Who's this band DFL? I like Minor Threat. Who's this band Fugazi? You get the idea. So you would buy the compilation, and every compilation came with a paper order form. So you would listen to the compilation, you'd find out there's some other bands you really like. Man, I really like 10 Foot Pole. I really like, you know, the list goes on and on. So then you would take the order form and you would fill it out, and you would order some records and some t-shirts, and then you would get it in the mail later. I remember that. That was how I initially discovered music. And so the radio did help me. So people that were coming up around like 98 or so, they didn't have that. They solely had the internet. And I do believe there's a connection between the homogenization of culture and the kind of accelerated neoliberalism we've experienced throughout nearly all of my lifetime. I do believe those two things are connected. The fact that punk rock was shunned from the airwaves, for the most part. That, you know, during the Reagan years, your punk bands and your hardcore bands, they had to start their own labels. They had to play their own venues. The mainstream was not interested. The mainstream was interested in pop music, in Madonna, in Michael Jackson. Not that those two pop stars are immensely talented. I'm not saying anything against them. I'm just saying that's what was in the mainstream. And hair metal, which, you know, not my cup of tea. So I do see the connection between those two things. So how do we combat the homogenization of culture now? I mean, especially since we live in a niche generation. We live in a generation of niches. Niches, however you want to pronounce it. Where instead of the next big thing that's going to connect with the masses, there's the next subgenres of things that connect with some pockets here and there. The cool thing about that, everybody has a chance at finding their piece of the pie. Something like a progressive comedy tour likely would not have existed 20 years ago. Because comedy clubs wouldn't want to book it. And the idea of bringing comedy to an alternative venue, that just wasn't all that common back then. Now something like that can exist because of the internet, because of content creation. Something like that can exist. And it's been working, which, again, thank you guys so much. It cannot exist without you. And, you know, let me know where you want to see the Progressive Comedy Tour next. January, we're coming to Florida. We'll see you then. And I'll talk about dates at the end of the stream like I always do. But what do we do to kind of reclaim our culture as people that are free-thinking, as people that want revolutionary change in this country, and as people that just want to keep this frickin' planet interesting? How do we battle that? I mean, obviously, we just got to keep putting our content out there and keep trying to reach as many people as we can and talking to our friends and our neighbors. But other than that, other than still going the course, what else can we do? Chris Walker says, keep supporting independent artists. Appreciate that. Stop the blue. Rebecca says, stop the blue no matter who bullshit. Know who you vote for. Daniel says, I don't know. Everything's fast food. Ugh. Nathan says, we traded CDs back in high school. That's how I found out the bands that I still listen to today. Chris says, punk is one genre that hasn't moved away from its anti-establishment lyrics and vibe. Yeah. Oh, and Patricia, thank you so much. Patricia gives a shout out to John Peel in the UK. Brilliant DJ. Brought the world so many brilliant bands, including the Undertones, another band I like. And Patricia, you bring up, we're coming to the UK. I told you, we're coming to the UK. But yeah, I was having a conversation with the BBC with someone, and they were like, the music shows. I was like, man, if they just gave me a music show on the BBC, I'd move out to Manchester. And they were like, you'd get like Top of the Pops or something like that. And my response was, hey, I know the BBC's not perfect. I'm not going to pretend they are. They're not. But John Peel. That was my response. You say Top of the Pops, I say John Peel. BBC's not perfect. They got their problems. But compared to the U.S., way better. Way freaking better. And John Peel's getting a little bit of love from other people. Everyone should check out, Crystal Collins says, everyone should check out Firebrand Records. It's a new venture. Oh, I'm not familiar with this. So I've heard Ryan. All right, well, let me read the whole thing first before I start commenting on it. Everyone should check out Firebrand Records. It's a new venture of Tom Morello and longtime Baltimore folk punk rocker Ryan Harvey. I've heard Ryan Harvey's name. I've never dug into the guy. I feel like I probably should. I'm going to check that out, Crystal, and thank you for bringing it up very much. Radical Socially Conscious Artist, a ton of good stuff. I can't wait to check this out. Sylvia says, I hate genre names. I grew up listening to radio stations that played rock, soul, country, folk, pop, etc. You know what, Sylvia? I echo that sentiment in many ways. I mean, when we use genres, it is a way of kind of making it a little easier on ourselves. But, a buddy of mine said this, and even though it's mildly pretentious, but I do think it's very true. And I know multiple entities have said this. I don't think my buddy invented it. But in a lot of ways, there's only two genres of music. Good music and bad music, and I try to find the good stuff. I do kind of feel that way in many ways. I know it's a slightly pretentious notion, but I do think it's kind of true. At least I didn't grow up with Poison. That's true, I didn't. And one more music shout out before we move on. Imperial Rooster from New Mexico. You will not be disappointed. Thank you, Tim. I will check that out.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you wanna know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you wanna know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your